What's up, college football fans, quarterback fans, or SEC fans in general? Welcome to the QB Spotlight video. I hope everyone's recovering from the LSU Florida State game last night. What a bonkers game. But today, we're going to talk about Florida and Kentucky. We're going to preview both defenses, but mainly talk about what each quarterback needs to do against the defense for the team to have success, for their team to come up on top. So with all that said, let's go ahead and dive right into it. Florida, Kentucky preview. Let's start off with the Kentucky defense and preview what Anthony Richardson needs to do first. But before we keep going, I just want to encourage all to consider subscribing to the channel if you look at any quarterback-related content. As long as it's related to the quarterback position, it's fair game here, and we do spend the majority of our time in the SEC, at least for right now. So let's get back into the preview. Let's talk about Kentucky's defense first. Now, Kentucky came off a pretty good game against Miami, Ohio. I think it was, 37-13, where they took care of Miami, Ohio, in convincing fashion, right? The game was never in doubt. The defense, as far as the takeaways against Miami, Ohio, came away with 3 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, so they did a good job getting pressure on the quarterback. They only gave up $179 in the air, and they gave up 111 yards on the ground. The biggest takeaway for me was the lack of big plays Miami, Ohio was able to get against Kentucky's defense. Now, that's to be expected. It's a MAC defense, but still, they only gave up 5.6 yards per attempt when Miami, Ohio was passing. So I think that right there tells you, okay, good. Kentucky's got a good pass defense, right? At least against Miami, Ohio. And I think, and I know we're looking at some clips from some games against LSU last year. I just didn't have the all 22 against Miami, Ohio to show, but just so you can see a little bit of what Kentucky's defense is trying to do here. I think you'll see a mixture of defensive schemes, of defensive coverages. Like right now, you're seeing a mix between man and zone, depending on the down and distance. I think they're going to want to try to confuse Anthony Richardson, especially with this being Richardson's third start. Yeah, he had a hell of a game last week, but still hasn't seen a bunch of live defenses, right? So the biggest thing here for Kentucky is they're going to try to get pressure on Richardson. Good luck with his legs, right? But they're going to try to get pressure on him, and then they're going to try to confuse him from showing him one thing pre-snap to something totally different post-snap. Like what you're seeing right here, you're seeing some cover 1 robber, and what basically that is it shows cover 2 pre-snap, and then the snap of the ball, you'll see one of the safeties, usually the safety that has the least amount of receivers to cover. You'll see that safety cave in and kind of become almost like a deep linebacker, taking away the middle kind of intermediate positions or intermediate passing, and you have one up top safety. So it looks like cover 2 pre-snap, then you have a robber, safety crashes in, and a lot of times if you're thinking one thing as a quarterback pre-snap and that safety crashes in, it's hard to see that safety at times and can kind of force interceptions, right? So the biggest thing Kentucky's defense is probably trying to do is confuse Anthony Richardson from pre-snap to post-snap, right? We know they're talented. They're probably going to get some pressure, but still, it's all about confusing Anthony Richardson before the snap of the ball, right? So if you're Anthony Richardson, what do you do, right? What do you do when you know you're facing a defense like Kentucky who's going to be very well coached, very disciplined, and trying to do some stuff pre-snap? Well, I think it comes down to a few things. I think it comes down to what he did well with last game against Utah. No negative plays, right? No negative plays and no turnovers. But right off the bat, no negative plays. He didn't get sacked once last week. So if you can keep that going and limit any sacks, that's going to put you in a good position. You can stay within the offense, but also no turnovers, right? Now, we're going to talk about Levis here in a few minutes, but chances are Levis is probably going to have a turnover. He's probably going to have an interception, right, unless things have changed from last year. He had one last week against Miami, Ohio. Again, we'll talk about that in a second, but if you don't have any turnovers and Levis has a turnover or 2, then you're going to be in a good position to come out on top in the game, right? Also, one thing that we talked about Richardson improving on last game was let plays develop, right? Don't leave the pocket too early. Keep the eyes downfield. Let plays develop, and you'll see some more open receivers come down, right? Don't let the defense confuse you, like we talked about. And then I think the run game can get guys out of position where Kentucky is trying to confuse Anthony Richardson pre-snap to post-snap. I think Florida, Billy Napier can confuse Kentucky's defense as well with all the pre-snap movement, with all the pre-snap motion going on. Get guys out of position. Use a play action to your favor to create easy passes. But then also, if it is a passing down, if you're Richardson, be able to hit those receivers like you did last game, right? So just to recap, Kentucky's defense trying to confuse Richardson from pre-snap to post-snap, I think is kind of the main ingredient or main key of Kentucky to beat Richardson, and then vice versa with Richardson. I think it is knowing that, not letting the defense confuse you, and then playing within the offense and letting your offense and letting Billy Napier take over and trying to confuse the defense as well. Okay, great stuff. Okay, so now let's go on to the Florida defense and what they could potentially do against Levis, and then what Levis needs to do against this Florida defense. And real quick, the clips we're going to watch of this Florida defense, which you may already be seeing right now, is clips from last year. Again, I didn't have the All-22 against Utah, but you can still see some of the same players playing now on this Florida defense. I know it's a different coaching staff, but take it with a grain of salt, but at least you've seen some kind of movement of this Florida defense. So the Florida defense against Utah, let's talk about the Utah game. 0 sacks. They did have 5 quarterback hurries. They were getting there some, but Rise did a really good job escaping pressure, which would be important for Levis, right? Rise did a good job escaping pressure, and Florida only had the interception at the very end of the game. The biggest takeaway was how successful Utah was against Florida's defense on third downs. They were 8 of 13, right? So 13 third downs, they converted 8 of them. That's a great percentage of conversion for third downs. So Florida's defense giving up third downs, right? The big takeaway from Florida's defense was there was no big plays. They forced Utah to drive up and down the field. In Utah's credit, they did, right? They didn't turn the ball over besides the last play at the very end, and they had key third down conversions. However, they were only their yards per attempt for each pass was only 6.8, right? So there was no real deep shots, no deep threat. Florida did give up 446 total yards, but again, not a deep threat. At least Utah didn't have any deep shots, right? So Florida's defense forced Utah to drive up and down the field, and Utah did. I think that's what's going to happen against Kentucky. I think they're going to try to force Kentucky to drive up and down the field and force Levis, right? So if you're Levis, let's talk about the keys for Levis to the game. Don't force the big play. I know Levis likes to let it rip and chuck it deep, and that's how the offense is built, right? Levis had 9 yards per attempt against Miami, Ohio, compared to Cam Rising 6.8 against the Florida defense. I think this is how interceptions happen. When you try to force things, try to force it deep and force the big play, right? So if you're Levis, you want to play consistent, almost follow Utah's script. I mean that as far as take what Florida's defense gives you, get the ball out quick, and set up some yak for your receivers, right? Set up some yards after the catch for your receivers. Be consistent. And convert on third downs. Converting on third downs, I think, is huge for Kentucky to win this game. And the last key, because I think Florida's probably going to be able to get some, I don't know, maybe they get some pressure, maybe they don't, but Cam Rising used his legs, and that hurt Florida's defense big time. I think Will Levis is going to have to use his legs as well, regardless if pressure is being put on him or not. If Levis can use his legs, that can really hurt Florida's defense, right? So big takeaways from Will Levis: don't force the ball. Take what they give you and follow Utah's script, right? Now, that's going to involve being consistent, converting on third downs, and hitting short to intermediate throws. And eventually, the hope would be that Florida's defense creeps up and you can take your shot deep, right? But if you're Levis, you got to avoid these turnovers somehow, some way. And so, yeah, that's kind of the breakdown of Levis and kind of our thoughts there. So, again, just to recap, Florida's defense and Levis. Florida's defense is going to want to keep everything in front and force you to take it down the field. If you're Levis, follow Utah's script. Don't force the ball and use your legs, right? Let's recap real quick Richardson and Kentucky's defense. Kentucky's going to want to get pressure and show one thing pre-snap, do something else post-snap. If you're Richardson, you know that. You try to do the same thing to them by getting them out of position with some pre-snap movement and some motion. Okay, so that's just the breakdown as far as what we think the quarterbacks need to do, and a brief breakdown of the defenses, right? And I think it's going to be a close game like the past few years, and I think it's probably going to come down the fourth quarter, and it sounds simple and cliche, but I think it's going to come down to whoever wins the turnover. Whoever does not turn the ball over or has the least amount of turnovers is probably going to win the game. So after this game is over, we'll come and check back and see if we are right. I know it's not rocket science by any means, but I think it's as simple as that. But I want to hear from you, Kentucky fans, Florida fans. What do you think your quarterback needs to do? And then what do you think your defense needs to do to contain the opponent's quarterback? Even if just SEC fans in general, let us know in the comments below. Should be a good game like it has been the past few years. Let us know in the comments below your thoughts on the game overall, quarterback, defense, all that fun stuff. Again, if you like this kind of breakdown, consider subscribing to the channel. Like it, comment. It does help us. We'll see you next time on the next quarterback-related video.